We've seen how to develop a software or a system. We've seen the development methods and the development life cycle. Now, how about the maintenance part of the SDLC? Once this thing has been rolled out into production, we're not done. We need to have a post-implementation review. We need to have periodic reviews. We'll need to have some maintenance, and at some point, this system that we spent time and money creating, it too will get phased out and replaced by a new system. So there will be a way to decommission this and disposal even of the software or the hardware, the code, the documentation, whatever. So these are things that we have to be looking at after we've rolled out whatever this new system is successfully. In our post-implementation review, why would we want to have a post-implementation review? Well, did this thing really do what we thought it would do? I mean, did this actually give us what we had hoped for? Are there any lessons learned? Were there any weaknesses that turned up that we really should address right now in maybe a minor release or a patch or something? Do we have ongoing problems? And how well has it been adopted? Do we need to follow up with training? Or are there some patches or tweaks or some configuration changes we need to make? So this is why we need to gather metrics on the performance and the acceptance of this thing. So our post-implementation review objectives, and IS auditors need to understand these objectives. Here's a good checklist. The review should answer questions. Did this meet our requirements? Really? Was there any measurable return on investment? Do we have any recommendations that might address some issues or weaknesses or inadequacies? Is there any plan to meet those recommendations? It is so frustrating to have a retreat. I mean, I've even been on retreats where the organization had the partners and the vendors and government people and whoever. Okay, what can we do now? And we have breakout sessions and we come up with documented retreats and or documented recommendations, and nothing's done. Nothing is acted on. That is so disappointing, and it's so bad for morale. So was there ever any plan to address the recommendations? If nothing else, to say, that's fabulous, these things we just can't do right now because of budget or this or that constraint, but we certainly can do those things. Or if nothing else, to even acknowledge, okay, thanks folks, but you know, people don't want to hear empty promises. They want to see some action. And if their recommendations aren't taken into account, they need to understand why. You know, it's when you're working on a project, leaving people in the dark is the surest way to get them to not cooperate later. So anyway, was there any plan for acting on the recommendations one way or another? And did we use the appropriate methodologies and standards and project management tools and all? Now, our methods for the post-implementation review. We can get staff and customer requirements. Questionnaires are terrific. Going and interviewing people, collecting metrics, looking at the effectiveness of the controls and the completeness of the documentation, and also how good is the performance and how good is the post-implementation support. These are all things we can do to review after this thing's been rolled out. In some cases, you can have something called an EAM, an embedded audit module, that basically is collecting performance data. Most major vendors, software vendors, there are some ways to collect logs. Certainly all operating systems have ways of collecting performance logs. And so we can have maybe software or tools embedded in an application or in an operating system or in some whatever system we've rolled out, just so we can look at performance data. I mean, you can get, with varying different budgets, from free to very expensive, monitoring consoles to monitor performance. And then we can look at, well, before we ran at this level, now we're running at this level, or we're running even, or we're down, and why is that? So whenever you can automate some of this data collection, it's very, very helpful, especially when you're trying to get things like event logs and things like uptime and things like system stability. Automated collection tools are excellent for that, or things like available bandwidth. These are the kinds of things that you'll want automated collection tools that you can just look at a console or print out a report. So when we are doing the post-implementation system review, here are some things that the IS auditor needs to keep in mind. Did the system's requirements actually, or were the system's requirements actually achieved? You know, when we review this, we went through all this time and trouble, and we had requirements. Did we actually meet the requirements? Did the feasibility studies cost benefits that were determined at the beginning of the project, were they correctly measured and reported to management? Were there any change requests? And we want to look at those change requests to see what kinds of changes were required and how they were dealt with. Are the controls that will protect the implementation and the function and the performance of this and help mitigate the risk, are they functioning adequately? Are there any error logs? Let's take a look at the error logs to indicate that the testing was maybe not thorough enough. And we want to see the inputs and the outputs to see if the data went in like this, did it come out correctly like that? If we took all kinds of information here, did the reports come out as they should? So these are the things that the IS auditor is going to want to look at.